as far as being a messenger of the Most High, as far as being a teacher of the Most High. You have the prophet and you have the priest. But all of these different titles here, they just specify exactly what it is that the person is going to do, you know. So, and that's what the intent and purpose of this lesson is for, before we get into the priesthood and being inaugurated. All right. Now, think about it in this context, about this episcope. Why was this term used opposed to the Greek term for priest? So the Greek term for priest, you'll find in number 2409, that word is hieros, all right? And it simply means a priest, literally or figuratively. It comes from another term, number 2413, and that word is hieros, and it means sacred. Now here's the thought. Think about this. At the time of Mashiach, okay, you still had the Aaronic or the Levitical priesthood functioning because the temple was still up. How would it have been if this new group of believers following after the Messiah began to refer to themselves as Kohanim? How would that have been? Okay, that's one thought behind it. The other thought is this. When people use this term here in regard to something that is sacred or something that is holy, it's in the context of the priest being anchored to that tabernacle, or at that time to the temple. That's why. Whereas the prophet was often out and about. So there was a level of sanctity that people placed on the priest that they didn't necessarily place on the prophet. But the truth of the matter is they were both equally sacred in the eyes of the Most High, which a lot of times people don't realize. There's a story in the Tanakh of a prophet who had died, right? And there were these two men fighting. And one man killed the other man. And the other man fell into the grave where the bones of this prophet were. And the sanctity of the bones of this prophet was so powerful that this man who had died resurrected. Now, I don't recall the passage right off, but if you look it up, I'm sure you'll be able to find it. In the next segment, I hope to remember this, but in the next segment, I'll tell you exactly where that's located, okay? But my point in mentioning that particular narrative is because when it comes to the prophet and the priest, both are sanctified in the eyes of the Creator. But when they looked at the priest, a lot of times people put a high level of sanctity to the priest because of the attachment to the temple. All right? So, now, what about the priest today? Because we have no temple, so to speak, right? Especially not a temple of the magnitude of the temple that was in Jerusalem. Okay? But here's the thought. A few passages for you. In Hebrew or Hebrews chapter 8, verses 1 and 2, listen to what it says. Now, in the things which we are saying, the main point is this. We have such a high priest who sat down on the right hand of the throne of the majesty in the heavens, a servant of the sanctuary and of the true tabernacle which Adonai pitched and not man. Okay? Next passage is, again, Hebrews chapter 9 and verse 11. But Mashiach, having come as a high priest of the coming good things, through the greater and more perfect tabernacle, not made with hands, that is to say, not of this creation. Okay? And our next passage, again, Hebrews chapter 9, verse 24. For Mashiach hasn't entered into holy places made with hands, which are representations of the true, but into the heavens itself, now to appear in the presence of Elohim for us. Now, the point in reading those passages is this. The mindset that we have to have in regard to today's priest or even today's prophet Although we may not be anchored to a physical temple, such as the Jerusalem temple, we are still connected to a greater tabernacle, a greater temple. Now, in Yochanan, which is John chapter 4, starting at verse 21, listen to this dialogue that Mashiach has with this Samaritan woman. Or I should say Shomroni. It's Yahusha said, "Woman, believe me, the time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You people don't know what you are worshiping. We worship what we do know, because salvation comes from the Yahudim. But the time is coming indeed. It's here now, when the true worshipers will worship the Father spiritually and truly. For these are the kind of people the Father wants worshiping him. Yah is a spirit, and worshipers must worship him spiritually and truly." So in other words, when we look at the priesthood today, which we understand under the Kohen HaGadol, which is Mashiach Yahusha, who is a priest after the order of Melchizedek or Melchizedek, okay? This, and we're going to see information in a moment. This is the high priest of the new priesthood. So the sanctity and the holiness that is attached to us is because we have now been attached to the real tabernacle, the real temple, because that way has now been opened. Okay? So let's continue. Let's look at a few of the qualifications of the bishop. All right? It says, a bishop then must be blameless. This is 1 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 2. A bishop then must be blameless, the husband of one wife. And let me stop right there for a moment, because I know a big thing among Hebrew Israelites today is the plural marriage, a man having more than one wife. Of course, this is something that is allowed, scripturally speaking, depending on what you do. Okay? If you have a position that falls under the category of being a bishop or a priest, we have strict instructions based on how our marriage is supposed to be. So listen to what it says. 1 Timothy chapter 3 verse 2 again. A bishop then must be blameless, the husband of one wife, vigilant, sober, of good behavior, given to hospitality, apt to teach. Now, why is this important? Remember, the most important task of the priest was to teach Israel. It was not the sacrificial system. It was to teach Israel the Torah. Okay? Now that word translated as apt to teach comes from number 1317, didactikos. Didactikos. Okay? It's where we get our English word didactic from, which means able to communicate messianic teaching, apt or skilled in teaching. That's what it means. Okay? It says, going back to 1 Timothy chapter 3 verse 3, not given to wine, no striker, not greedy of filthy lucre, but patient, not a brawler, not covetous, one that rules well his own house, having his children in subjection with all gravity. For if a man know not how to rule his own house, how shall he take care of the assembly of Elohim? Not a novice, lest being lifted up with pride, he fall into the condemnation of the devil. Moreover, he must have a good report of them which are without, lest he fall into reproach and the snare of the devil. Okay? Now, when you think about the position of a bishop is an overseer of the assembly. No different than what a priest would do. Okay? So what we're doing today, again, we are simplifying the word of the Most High, so that we all come to a better understanding of exactly what it is that the Creator has ordered. All right? Now, I need to write something else up on the board, because we want to touch on what a deacon is. Now the word for deacon, number 1249, diakonos, it says an attendant, okay? And then it says that is generally a waiter at a table or in other menial duties, all right? Now, I wanted to reference Acts chapter 6, verses 1 to 7, as we have on the board, and just listen to what's being said here. And in those days, when the number of the Talmudim was multiplied, there arose a murmuring of digression against the Ivrit, or Hebrew, because their widows were neglected in the daily ministration. Then the 12 called the multitude of the Talmudim, or the disciples, and said, it is not reason that we should leave the word of Elohim and serve tables. Now listen to that. Some people may think that was a little cold-hearted. No, because the Creator called certain people to preach, to teach, remember, and he set some, and he gave some apostles, prophets, teachers, etc. Okay? For the what? For the perfecting of the saints, for the edifying of the body. So what Brother Kefa is saying here, he's saying, or what the apostles are saying, they're saying, it is not reason that we should leave the word of Elohim and serve tables. Wherefore, brethren, look ye out among you 7 men of honest report, full of the Holy Spirit and wisdom, whom we may appoint over this business. But we will give ourselves continually to prayer and to the ministry of the word. And the saying pleased the whole multitude. And they chose Stephen, a man full of faith and of the Holy Spirit, and Philip and Prochorus, and Nicanor, and Timon, and Parmenas, and Nicholas, a proselyte of Antioch, whom they set before the apostles, and when they had prayed, they laid hands on them, and the word of Elohim increased, and the number of the Talmudim multiplied in Jerusalem greatly, and a great company of the priests were obedient to the faith. Okay? Another point that we have to make in regard to what's happening in the New Testament, the Creator is now restructuring. This is what took place. He's restructuring Israel. Okay? Because Israel just entered into a new phase. And remember the term growth and development? With the advent of Mashiach, Israel moved into a new phase. So changes had to be made. Okay? And it's not changes in the sense that it becomes something totally different, but the whole system is now being restructured. And what we're doing, we're showing is that the restructuring of the system still falls under these two basic categories, the prophet and the priest. Needless to say, our focal point is the priesthood. Okay? Now, we want to make a comparison now with the deacons. So, in Numbers chapter 8, verse 19, listen to what's there. I have given the Levites as a gift to Aharon and to his sons from among the sons of Israel to do the service of the sons of Israel in the tent of meeting, and to make atonement for the sons of Israel, that there be no plague among the sons of Israel when the sons of Israel come near to the sanctuary. Now, when he says that he gives the Levites as a gift, it's similar to what just took place with the deacons. The deacons were chosen to be attendants so that they can continue ministering the word, teaching. The Levites were given for the exact same reason, so that the priesthood could function and do everything else that they needed to do. Okay? In Numbers chapter 18 and verse 6, it says, behold, I myself have taken your brothers, the Levites, from among the sons of Israel. They are a gift to you. This is Yahweh speaking to Aharon and speaking to the priesthood. He says, they are a gift to you, dedicated to Yahweh to do the service of the tent of meeting. And again, when they were using the tabernacle and when they were traveling, what the Levites would do, they would carry the different pieces that goes to the tabernacle. They were assisting the priest. Okay? They were attendants, so to speak. So in respect of their positions, and this is what I want to write up on the board, you have Levites, right? Well, Levites are actually comparable to deacons today. Okay? Now, we didn't get into all of this detail in this particular lesson, but maybe at a later time we'll revisit some of the tasks that the Levites had when the temple was built. Because they didn't have to carry pieces of the tabernacle around, so their duties actually changed. Again, growth and development. Okay? Now, let me find my place again. My apologies. We're dealing with the deacons. So let's go back to 1 Timothy chapter 3 and let's pick up in verse 8. It says, likewise must the deacons be grave, not double-tongued, not given to much wine, not greedy of filthy lucre, holding the mystery of the faith in a pure conscience. And let these also first be proved, then let them use the office of a deacon. You hear that? At the office of a deacon, being found blameless. Even so, wives are grave, not slanderous, sober, faithful in all things. Okay, to describe how the wives are supposed to be as well. Verse 12. Let the deacons be the husbands of one wife. Hear that? Ruling their children in their own houses well. For they that have used the office of a deacon well purchase to themselves a good degree, and great boldness in the faith which is in Mashiach Yahusha. Okay? So now, another passage, Philippians chapter 1 and verse 1. It says, Shaul and Timotheus, the servants of Yahusha HaMashiach, to all the saints in Mashiach Yahusha, which are at Philippi, with the bishops and deacons. Okay? So again, an order has to be established. The order falls under the Messiah. Okay, first you have the Father, then you have the Messiah, then you have those whom the Messiah called and put in these leadership positions or in these offices, be it prophet or priest. Okay? So, let's simplify. Each of these positions that we've been looking at in the New Testament, right, is an office. Okay? And again, our subtopic, the priesthood as an office. An office being a position of authority. Okay? The term Kohen, one officiating, means holding a position of authority. So in other words, we have the priesthood. As the Kohen was responsible for teaching Israel the Torah and how to live according to the will of Yahweh, likewise, that's the same thing that the rabbi or the scribe or the pastor or the bishop would have to do. As we just read, the bishop has to be apt to teach. Okay? Now, reference. Bereshit or Genesis 14:18, Talim or Psalms 110:4. It says, Genesis 14:18, and Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine, and he was the priest of the Most High Mighty One. Melchizedek was both a king and a priest. That didn't emphasize that part earlier, but I wanted to emphasize it now. King and priest, all right? The fact that he brought forth bread and wine, okay, is only an allusion to the true bread from the heavens, whose blood was shed. Okay, just an allusion to that. Keep that in mind. When it says again in Psalms 110:4, Yahweh has sworn and will not repent. You are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. Melchizedek, again, is a pattern for the Kohanim. Okay? The order, the Hebrew word Dibra, the order is referring to a rank, class, or special group in a community or society with a specified arrangement. Let me read that again. The word order, which comes from the Hebrew word Dibra, is defined as a rank, class, or special group in a community or society with a specified arrangement. So when it says after the order of Melchizedek, it's talking about after the rank or the class or this special group or this specified arrangement. Okay? Now, again, the Aaronic or the Levitical priesthood was used to teach us. That's why we looked at the breakdown. We looked at the name of Lewi. We looked at the name of Kohat. We looked at the name of Amram, Yocheved, and Aharon. They mean something. Okay? But what they mean actually is a testimony to the prophetic office of priest that is now being set up. Okay? So, let's close out. Let's go to Hebrews chapter 7, starting at verse 1. It says, this Melchizedek, king of Shalem, a Kohen of El Ha'elyon, met Abraham on his way back from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him. Also, Abraham gave him a tenth of everything. Now, first of all, by translation of his name, he is king of righteousness. Melchizedek means king of righteousness. And then he is also king of Shalem. That was his actual position, which means king of peace. There is no record of his father, mother, ancestry, birth, or death. Rather, like the son of Elohim, he continues as a Kohen for all time. Just think how great he was. Even the patriarch Abraham gave him a tenth of the choicest spoils. Now the descendants of Lewi, who became Kohanim, have a commandment in the Torah to take a tenth of the income of the people, that is, from their own brothers, despite the fact that they too are descended from Abraham. But Melchizedek, even though he was not descended from Lewi, took a tenth from Abraham. Also, he blessed Abraham, the man who received Elohim's promises. And it is beyond all dispute that the one who blesses has higher status than the one who receives the blessing. Moreover, in the case of the Kohanim, the tenth is received by men who die, while in the case of Melchizedek, it is received by someone who is testified to be still alive. One might go even further and say that Lewi, who himself receives tithes, paid a tenth through Abraham, inasmuch as he was still in his ancestor Abraham's body when Melchizedek met him. Now, as was mentioned in our previous segment, there's a time and a season for all things, right? So, in verse 11, Hebrews chapter 7, it says, if therefore perfection were by the Levitical priesthood, for under it the people received the Torah, what further need was there that another priest should rise after the order of Melchizedek, and not be called after the order of Aharon? Asking a very important question. The word is asking a very important question. And when the Creator asks questions, he wants us to think. You know, that's right. Which we've discussed. Okay? Now, there's a practical answer to this, and there's a spiritual answer to it. We touched on the spiritual answer when you look at the definitions of the names and things like that, partially, right? That's part of the spiritual answer. The practical, however, is the fact that the priesthood was corrupted. Okay, there's a passage we're going to read. Now, in Malachi chapter 2 and verse 8, it said, and this is about the priesthood, but you have turned away from the path. You have caused many to stumble in the Torah. Opposed to teaching the Torah, you cause people to stumble in the Torah. This is the priesthood now. You have corrupted the covenant of Lewi. They corrupted it. Says Yahweh Zevaot. Therefore I have also made you contemptible and wicked before all the people, according to the way you have not kept my ways, but have had respectful persons in the Torah. All right. So another thing that you want to look at is the fact that during the time of between the Grecian, the Median Persian Empire and the Grecian Empire, the Aaronic priesthood was being bought and sold. Okay? Again, it was polluted. It was corrupted. It was time for a restructuring. Hence, when Mashiach comes on the scene, what does he do? He restructures. Okay? Moshe chose the 12. Mashiach Yahushua chose the 12. Moshe chose the 70. Mashiach Yahushua chose the 70. Why did he do that? He's restructuring. Okay? The keys that Israel had was now given to Brother Kepha. Restructuring. Okay? This is what we're talking about. And we are in the day and time when a restructuring or a restoration is needed again. Hence, our current line of lessons. Okay? This is the work that the Creator is doing. Okay? According to His Word. All right? Now, let's go back to Hebrews chapter 7 so we can finish this out. It says, I'm going to start in verse 11. If therefore perfection were by the Levitical priesthood, for under it the people received the Torah, what further need was there that another priest should rise after the order of Melchizedek, and not be called after the order of Aharon? For the priesthood being changed, hear that? There is made of necessity a change also of the Torah. So now, when it says changed, that's our last word here, metatethemi, okay, number 3346, it means to